Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah An-Nahl, chapter 16, verses 33 to 42. The Quran helps to understand some finer aspects of the human psyche. Whatever psyche we have and its potentials, we have seen that the Quran puts a lot of light on many aspects as it goes through various verses. References, and this is our contact in case there is any query, question regarding this presentation or any of the previous presentations. A recap of verses 21 to 32. Human beings degrade themselves when they willingly accept man-devised laws and other human beings as their Allah or God. Some even accept those as Allah who are dead. Allah exists, and not accepting His rule for obedience leads to problems in the world. As without the guidance of the Quran, man can never create a world which is free from chaos, conflict, fear, and huzn. And we can see this in the world of 2023 in which we are living. We need to keep analyzing man-made systems in order to acquire a very high level of conviction about the Quran and have Iman in it. And the way we have gone through these aspects previously as well, but just as a reminder that when we see problems in the world, few thoughts should come to our mind immediately. First, that this is a man-made system, and this is what the human beings can create at this point in time. And second is, the thought also should come that if we have system of Deen, all these problems can gradually disappear. People who reject the Quranic guidance after going through it take it lightly and think these are the tales of the ancients in it. And that's a big mistake, that if we ignore what is happening around us in the world, despite being the students of the Quran, then we are not really developing ourselves. Because the self only develops when we are conscious of the values of the Quran. The Quran makes it clear that such people not only carry their own burdens with them, but they also share the burdens of those others whom they misguide. This misguidance of people leads to an increase in problems in the world with the passage of time. It is like this, that if in a family everyone is doing wrong and nobody is doing right, then how can that family benefit in the world? Because ultimately they will suffer at the hands of their own decision-making, which is wrong. As time passes, the results of their deeds begin to appear before them and ultimately lead to their elimination through destruction. This is based on historical evidence. For those who follow the path of the Quran, there is good news, and they are rewarded both in this life as well as in the life of the hereafter. Because by following the Quran, firstly, of course, understanding it, and within the constraints of the man-made system, when we follow it, we will see that the results start appearing before us after a short while. Firstly, they appear within us, that is, our outlook changes. Secondly, those who join in and their life as well changes, and one is able to pass on the message to others. An overview of today's presentation. Whatever takes place in the human world, it is through the hands of people, and this is where they need to look for solutions to man-created problems. Everything in the universe, including human affairs, follows Allah's laws. Following the path of ancestors and previous generations will never lead to solving human problems which are created by the unbridled human intellect. Man needs to pause and reflect and then use the Quranic guidance to deal with the issues of his earthly life. The messengers who came with the book were sent to people with clear instruction and guidance to stay away from man-made laws, and nations were asked to reflect on the rise and fall of previous nations to learn a lesson. Differences need to be removed in order to understand the system of Deen. Because if the differences exist, then obviously we can't change the system. The system only changes when people become united. We can even reflect on our own psyche. If there is a division, there is a confusion, there is a stress and worries within our own psychology and our own thinking, then our output is affected. Allah's Wahi guides on every important aspect of the human, and man is told that guidance only comes to those who make the choice for it. The whole path is signposted, and that is important. We will look at some of these aspects today. If wahi is followed, then it will start to show its signs gradually as per the process and procedure outlined in the Quran. Understanding this is part of learning the book. The path of wahi needs a display of patience and perseverance, as this involves human self-development, which requires an adequate time of respite. And of course, in today's world, we need far more patience and perseverance because so many things have gone wrong on every aspect of human living. Let us go to the first two verses of today's presentation, 33 and 34, an aspect of the law of requital. Hal yanzuruna illa an ta'tiyahumul malaikatu an ya'tiya amru rabbika kazalika fa'alal lazina min qablihim wa ma zalamahumullahu walakin kanu anfusahum yazlimun fasabahum sayyi'atu ma amilu wa haqa bihim ma kanu bihi yastahzi'un. What are they waiting for other than that the malaika, that is the universal forces, should descend upon them with the punishment, or that the decision of your Rabb should manifest directly? So Quran is addressing the opponents of Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen. This is what those people used to do who have passed away before them. Consequently, when the time for the outcomes of their deeds arrived, they were destroyed. Allah did not do the slightest injustice to them. Allah does not do injustice to anyone. They had done injustice to their own selves. In other words, the evil outcomes of their own deeds themselves appeared before them, and the destruction about which they used to be warned and which they used to mock at, that same destruction engulfed them. Further reflections on these two verses. Here the Quran has drawn our attention to the universal forces which are placed in the service of mankind. However, there are conditions attached to their use in terms of our individual and collective life. These forces are not good or evil in themselves, as these follow Allah's laws. It is their use over the short and long term which matters, and secondly, the values within which we employ them in our worldly life. For example, in the world of 2023, many kind of forces are under our use. For example, nuclear energy and technology, solar energy, wind power, wave power, force of gravity, ultrasound, X-rays, MRI technology, digital technology, computing, laser, and the list is very long and we all know about it. However, despite all these advances and benefits, the world we have is full of conflicts and chaos, and with every passing day, problems are increasing and multiplying for the common man. And it is the human beings who are doing it. And that is the point we should keep in mind, that it is the human beings who are doing wrong. Here the Quran, by addressing us as students, asks us to inform those who think there is no accountability in the human world to note two important points. First, are they waiting for the arrival of the cosmic forces or malaika to deal with them as they are prompting evil on Allah's land? That is, the way they are using and employing these forces, there is destruction inbuilt in them if they are doing wrong. So these forces themselves are going to get hold of them and do damage. For example, we have seen flooding in Libya. So water is considered to be life-giving, but over there, because of mismanagement, they are suffering. Second, that Amr should descend on them as part of the law of Rububiyat, which states that mankind cannot be left to tyranny indefinitely. And Amr over here means Allah's laws, Allah's direction, Allah's command. Few more comments on these two verses. Then Allah asks us to tell them that both these aspects of dealing with unjust people can be witnessed from past history. The Quran notes a permanent value. Allah wronged them not, nay, they wronged their own selves. So people should stop looking for some kind of divine intervention or divine explanation of what is going on in the world. They should look at human beings who are creating problems in the world. Another interesting point is worth noting here. A link is established between our cognitive makeup and the physical arena of life. وَلَكِنْ كَانُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ. This all happens when human beings resort to injustice in the world, which is the consequence of their choices and evil decision-making. That is, they were doing injustice to themselves. All decision-making out with the permanent values has an expiry date written over it and always lead to destruction sooner or later, depending upon the scaling. Very important point I have mentioned over here, which we need to remind ourselves continuously. that the world in which we are living, we might see some short-term benefits of certain decision-making by human beings, but we should remember that these are on relative values, not on permanent values. So ultimately, even short-term decision-making and its benefits, which we see in the world, are going to turn to be contributing towards the decline and creating more problems. And this is a big subject for us to study as well and keep an eye on these events. In the second verse, the Quran concisely sums up for us as a reminder. Evil deeds always manifest in destruction, and why do human beings ignore their evil conduct? And the Quran says, وَحَاكَ بِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا بِهِ يَسْتَهْزِئُونَ. What they used to mock at, and they used to think that it is a joke and they can do whatever they like in the world, the outcomes of those was the one which got hold of them ultimately. They thought there is no accountability, and power intoxicated them. Continuing on these two verses, why does power intoxicate those who are in control? The Quran also notes that they used to mock those who warned them about their evil conduct, not only ignored them, but ridiculed them. And in today's world, we witness journalists being kidnapped, imprisoned, tortured, and even murdered just for reporting something which is illegal and illegitimate according to the man-made laws. So whatever they have established themselves, they are going against it. For example, they say this is the freedom of speech, and if somebody criticizes them or exposes some of their evil deeds, then they are punished. So that means they are providing evidence even against their own laws. The world in 2023 is against the Quranic value system, hence not being managed legitimately. And this is the state of human laws. And we can see that all human laws are against Allah's laws. And that is the point which we are trying to make over here. And this is to which the Quran is pointing our attention to. This means that people in power make these laws for others, not for themselves. And that is a very important point. We should keep it in mind that all these people who make these laws, they keep loopholes where they can follow their own desires and wishes rather than following the laws which they make for others. What does this tell us about the human psyche at a fundamental level? The charge against Pharaoh was, Inna Firauna ala fil arde wa jala ahlaha shayyan. That is, truly Pharaoh was elated in the land and broke up his people into parties. So Quran says that dividing human beings into parties is a crime of the highest level. And here we have systems which are based on these parties. Why into factions? In order to divide and rule. Keep them busy in accusing each other so that they do not pay attention to what he was doing in the land in terms of exploitation, subjugation, injustice, killings, propaganda. We can witness this in today's world clearly. Next point is human beings resort to ridicule when they do not consider their lives to be part of the serious program of creation by Allah. And that is the basic issue. That human beings, if they don't hold themselves accountable, they think that they can get away with their deeds and they don't take Allah's creation seriously. We can see the seriousness of our creation when everything in the universe is obeying the laws of Allah. Let us go to the next verse, 1635. Obedience to forefathers, ancestors, it is a form of idol worship. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا لَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مَا عَبَدْنَا مِن دُونِهِ مِن شَيْءٍ نَحْنُ وَلَا آبَاؤُنَا وَلَا حَرَّمْنَا مِن دُونِهِ مِن شَيْءٍ كَذَلِكَ فَعَلَ الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِهِمْ فَهَلْ عَلَى الرُّسُلِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ. Very important points covered in this verse. These people who include others as partners in the rule and authority of Allah say that had Allah wished, then we and our ancestors would never have worshipped any other than Allah. Nor would we have declared anything as haram without His command. We are doing this because this is indeed how Allah wished it to be. What option do we have in this, and what is our error? Man is constrained. This matter is not something specific to them only. And this is the basis on which the whole concept of taqdeer exists among religions, that they consider themselves as helpless and being victims of this taqdeer business. People before them had also adopted this approach. They also used to take cover under the concept of taqdeer to justify their wrong path. Just reflect that those people who declare Allah to be responsible for their own being astray, who can bring them onto the right path? Because they are going against the factual position, the evidence-based position that human beings are responsible for whatever they do during this life. And if they don't take that responsibility, then obviously the world will be a mess. The responsibility of the messengers is only that whatever wahi is given to them, they should pass it on clearly to the people. The path of ease and least effort. And what is that path? After reflecting on the psyche of the powerful, here the Quran presents before us the psyche of those who are religious and have created those belief systems which conform to their base desires. And we can see that in the world, the majority of the population is based on various religions who all have some kind of fatalism or taqdeer or qismat inbuilt in their belief system. Associating partners with Allah is a frequent theme noted in the Quran, and this points to a serious flaw in human cognition. In today's world, everywhere man-devised laws control the daily lives of people. The religious mentality provides justification for living under these man-made laws. Because it's very easy, people just accept this is the way world is meant to be. Firstly, people do not think that there is anything wrong with the word, as they declare this to be the will of their God, and therefore it is sinful to think about it. Hence, no possibility of questioning those who unleash tyranny in the world. Secondly, this is what their forefathers did. For example, they lived contentedly under their masters, and these masters allowed them to practice their religious rituals. Since the aim of life is to please their gods, hence this is how life is meant to be. This is the recipe for disaster for millions, maybe billions, of human beings on planet Earth, because a change can never emerge if people become satisfied with their own slavery and even consider it as a blessing from their gods. This is the reason that the Quran has declared shirk to be a supreme injustice, which human beings do to themselves. As with this kind of psyche, they simply cannot come out of their self-imposed cognitive handicap. Because if human beings think that this is the way world is meant to be, and the rich and powerful are meant to rule us, and we are quite happy to be ruled by them, then how are things going to change? And why do they complain then? Because they don't think, they don't put 2 + 2 together. And that is the human problem at fundamental level, because they do not rationally think and reason their own existence. Religious belief systems create emotive comfort because they don't have to do anything. They just keep doing the same, just follow their rituals, and then in the evening they think that they have done a great job and their life is fine. Here the Quran has noted something which we witness in today's world as a stark reality, i.e., when people are asked to question their ritualistic existence, they respond by saying that this is how our forefathers and their ancestors lived their life under these belief systems. And do you mean that all of them were misguided and astray? And we also experience this kind of counter-questioning by others. You mean that for 1400 years, everything, all history is wrong? Or were they wrong? And are you the only intelligent person in this world? Are you the only one who can understand the Quran? So these kind of counter-arguments, when somebody puts forward, it means they are not interested to change their own psyche and their own condition in which they are living. Secondly, we believe in our qismat and predestination. Hence, the way we believe it is meant to be like this, as this is what Allah wishes us to be like. And that is the worst thing. If they say that we do it, then there is a hope for them to change. But if they relate it to their concept of God, then the situation becomes impossible. The moment one relates their thoughts and deeds to some invented belief in a God, the hearts become sealed. Whatever we have in our religious makeup as forbidden, for example, haram, is meant to be there as we believe that this is how Allah wishes us to be. You tell us to question this belief system and to question our way of living life, but we are very satisfied with the way we live our religious life. We do not see the Jahannam of our existence in the world. We are not prepared to glance outside this hell, period. After explaining this behavior to us, the Quran states that the duty of the messengers and of all students of the Quran is to warn and pass the message of Wahi on to people obviously after understanding this point, because as we are going through the Quran, we have seen that our own understanding is multiplying with every talk we have, and at our own time as well, we go through the Quran and pay attention to what is going on in the world. They are not there to force anyone to change. There is no compulsion in Deen. Let us go to the next verse, 1636. Transgression of Allah's laws has consequences. وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ هَدَى اللَّهُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ حَقَّتْ عَلَيْهِ الضَّلَالَةُ فَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ. We sent a messenger to every nation so that he can inform them that they should obey the commands of one Allah only and avoid the obedience and rule of every non-divine authority. Therefore, some of them adopted the right path according to the law of Allah, and others rejected it, so misguidance became stamped on them. And it's very interesting that messengers came to every community. And even today, we can see there are warners in every community in every part of the world. People are pointing it out. We can see it on social media, to higher authorities, to people in power that don't do wrong, but they ignore it and do not listen to it. Therefore, travel around different lands and ponder on the historical events of world nations and on the signs of their ruins and habitations, and see what was the end of those nations who falsified the authority and law of Allah. The Quran leads to complete freedom. The purpose of Allah's messengers was to communicate the wahi to Allah to the people around the place where He lived, and to inform them that there is a better option to live this worldly life. The man-made laws and systems based on these laws make you suffer due to their inherent limitations. And as a consequence, the rich and powerful exploit the majority. This is an evidence-based fact. The system of Deen provides total freedom from the shackles of other human beings. Because at a basic level, we understand that what is constraining us, what is preventing us from making use of our choice and intent, and who is ruling us. Because no human being has the right to rule other human beings, because we are all equal. And we should put ourselves under the rule of Allah's laws, that is permanent values, because that is how the self develops. That is the way our potentials come out. In order to exit this debilitating state of existence, here is the code of life. And if it is obeyed after accepting it through thinking rationally based on evidence, and in order to move away from the rebellious man-made systems, your existing state of affairs will change into prosperity and success. The evidence of the truth of this guidance is to witness the life of those who choose to follow it. The messengers themselves served as models for their people, and if they could follow the guidance of Allah as human beings, others could do the same. Indeed, those who became mu'mineen confirmed this by obeying the commands of Allah. History helps to strengthen Iman in the guidance of Allah. An aspect of history is also mentioned in this verse. The verse is concluded with an instruction by the Quran, فَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ. Go and travel through planet Earth and see what was the end of those people who opted to go against or reject the laws of Allah. What were those aspects which these people disobeyed? Let us remind ourselves with some of these. Firstly, they did not question the exploitive man-made systems in which they were born. Because if we do not question it, that means we are living at an animalistic state or condition, because animals don't question. We need to question the system around us, which is debilitating us or exploiting us. They never examined the slavery and subjugation which these systems subjected their fellow human beings to, creating classes in the society in which they lived. Secondly, they never held themselves accountable despite being aware of the law, what you sow, so shall you reap. That is the law of requital. Thirdly, they were repeatedly warned by some among them, and they knowingly ignored them and continued on the path of perdition through their evil doings. They could see the ill effects of their actions on the society, but persisted on continuing to do this. And we hear this kind of a phrase that everyone is doing, so I should also do it. We don't do things just because majority does it. We have to question it. Fourthly, they obstructed the path of those who tried to follow the guidance of the Quran, ridiculed them, and labeled them with different labels. And we see that very commonly practiced against Tolu Islam as well. Fifthly, they assumed that their life ends with death and were never interested in exploring the possibility of the continuation of human life beyond physical death. Over here, what I've done is, just to make our presentation a bit more interesting, some signs and pictures, because what Quran said is that go over the signs of previous nations. And here we can see Roman temple, which is in Syria, and we can see that even in those times, people used to make very good structures. This is Jerash in Jordan. It's a big site, and if we go there, there is a lot historically we can look at. And this is Petra in Jordan, very famous place. Ruins of the people of Lut. And surprisingly, people never went back, rehabilitated those places. They never started to live in those areas again, some of these areas. Some they did, but others, for some unknown reasons, never went back. The people of Lut, this is the second picture. And Queen Sheba Palace, which is in Yemen. And this is the ruins created by human beings, Mosul, Iraq, post-US invasion. And this is Homs, Syria. And some destructions caused by people themselves. In fact, both kinds of destructions are caused by human beings, either directly or indirectly. Because in one case, when the dams break up, because they fail to manage the water systems properly. Some destructions caused by people themselves, which is under the law of requital, while others are caused by more powerful nations to weak nations as part of law of requital. The issue for the students of the Quran is, why do human beings do this to each other? In fact, why do they do it to each other, or why do they do it to themselves? Is it meant to be like this? Yes, it is meant to be like this when people who rule the world are not guided by the wahi of Allah. So the basic cause is that the values under which human beings live, those decide the length of their life or civilization in the world. And that is the important point for us as students of the Quran. Should Mu'mineen do something about it or just complain? In the word of 2023, we see willful blindness at all levels in every part of the globe. Let us go to the next verse, 1637. Man is free to make choices in life and then live by the consequences of those choices. In tahris ala hudahum fa inna allaha la yahdi man yudillu wa ma lahum min nasirin. Very important verse and important aspect of human psyche is pointed out here. O Rasool, we know that it is your heartfelt desire that these people adopt the right path and thus become protected from destruction. But these people who, according to that choice bestowed on them by Allah, adopt the wrong path. Allah does not compel them to tread on the straight path. And nor can anyone be their helper and supporter against the law of Allah. So important point is that if people follow their chosen path, then they should not get any help. They should follow that chosen path. And that is something very important for us to remember as we live this life. A few reflections on this verse. Understanding the trait of choice and intent is important in understanding the Quran. For example, if we resort to use this kind of language that I want to make others somehow come to the path of the Quran, then essentially I have not yet come to grips with the human psyche of seeking guidance. Even Allah cannot guide anyone to his path if they do not wish this. And this is the way the process and law of his guidance functions. The Quran makes it clear that the system of the universe and the earth is created as al-haq, that is for constructive purposes, so that everyone possessing choice and intent, that is, they possess a nafs, is recompensed for what they do during their life spent in this world. Then it is declared clearly that this world is yours as possessors of choice and intent, hence live as you wish, because Quran says, Amalu ma shaytum, do whatever you wish. This is your word, and just make sure that you do right things. Otherwise, you will end up with the evil consequences of your deeds. Allah will never guide those as per his law who wish to go astray, as this would be contrary to their trait of choice and intent, i.e. the purpose of human creation. Understanding this point in all its connotations is important for students of the Quran and with regard to the system of Deen. Continuing with this verse, when we see that people who, when they are exposed to the teaching of the Quran, do not see a system of Deen in it, then one may wonder what makes these people continue to be interested in its content. For this, we have to delve deep into the psychological aspects which are explained in various verses. Here, the Quran has pointed to two different kinds of wishes. Firstly, those who have found guidance in it and seeing the benefits of it, they invite others to its value system, and at times may insist as well and try to convince them, while others display their disinterest and ultimately move away. And some even start to oppose Mu'mineen. Why do they do this? And these are important, valid questions which come to our mind as well, that if something is so obvious in the Quran for me, why it is not obvious to others who also claim to go through it? Human beings evaluate everything in their life from the aspects of profit and loss. Those who are beneficiaries of man-made systems do not wish it to be replaced by a system in which there are no poor and no exploitation. And that is something which is deep down ingrained in these human beings who particularly come from religious background. Since they get used to exploiting and subjugating the poor for their benefit and enjoy being arrogant and superior, hence they resist the Quranic guidance and what it stands for. The Quran has pointed to these aspects in various verses, that at a basic level, human beings are very egoistic and they have that haughtiness and arrogance inbuilt within them, and they have to overcome those proclivities, those tendencies. This aspect should be kept in mind by the students of the Quran. Next verse, 1638, life can emerge from death as per the law of Allah. وَأَقْسَمُوا بِاللَّهِ جَهْدَ إِيمَانِهِمْ لَا يَبْعَثُ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَمُوتُ بَلَا وَعْدًا عَلَيْهِ حَقًّا وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. And these people swear repeatedly that once a death-like shroud encompasses nations and they are no longer counted among living nations, they cannot rise again. Hence, this Jamaat of Mu'mineen, which consists of those who are weak and deprived, can never attain power. The reality is that they do not have a correct estimate of the law of Allah. Say to them that this is the promise of Allah which will appear in front by turning into a reality, and this apparently weak Jamaat will definitely gain control and authority. But most people, seeing their existing state, do not know how will this take place. So Quran says that even in this world, life can come out of death-like situation. So for us, there is no reason to be in despair or despondent or not being happy. We need to keep following the Quran to the best of our ability and then wait how the results will emerge in some later point in time. Understanding human existence. This is also about the two ideologies of life where Haqq always succeeds if it is pursued, and it always has the inbuilt potential to succeed. And this is noted in the Quran, Yabasullahu man yamuto, that life does come out of death. Life can come out of a death-like state if the laws of Allah are followed. If we relate to the life of the hereafter, that is this verse, if we relate to that, then we know people wish to live forever and do not wish to die. Here the Quran has stated that these people do not wish another life, thinking that once the physical body dies, then there is no possibility of continuation of their life. Why do they fail to accept the possibility of another life as presented by Allah in the Quran? There are a number of verses on this aspect. And surprisingly, even those people who claim to go through it very intently miss the point, rather than feeling happy and exploring this aspect further before rejecting it. The reason is very simple. They do not wish to be held accountable for all the mess they create in the world because of their deeds and want immediate benefits of life. Never mind if in the process they destroy the lives of millions. A psyche created through injustice and exploitation of fellow human beings simply cannot think of the possibility of another life or the continuation of it any further beyond physical existence. Their whole endeavor and striving in this life is to accrue benefits for themselves. This psyche of theirs has no space left in it for the guidance of Allah. Because if our mind is very much focused on on accumulating benefits in this life, and we do not see poor and exploited around in the world, that is yatim and miskeen, then essentially a lot of these verses don't make any sense to us. Some more reflections on this verse. Then the Quran points to this fact that just like the first creation of man from nothing, the second stage of giving life to man after death is part of the process of the functioning of the law of requital. It then tells students of the Quran a few important aspects in this regard. Firstly, the rejection by these people should not cast any doubts in your minds that with the death of the physical body, maybe there is no raising up again. This is a promise of Allah, and He does not go against His promises. Any doubts should be eliminated by looking at all the signs around us, as well as on the evidence of the existence of a self within us. Secondly, look at most people to whom you have managed to pass the message of the Quran and see statistically how many have bothered to come to it. It is not about numbers, it is about applying rational thinking based on evidence as presented by the Quran, which helps to strengthen conviction in what is noted here in the book. We have gone through this aspect previously as well, that numbers don't matter in the book of Allah. In the book of Allah, the Messenger Ibrahim was an ummah in himself. In the case of, for example, Messenger Yusuf, one man became so righteous that things started to fall in place. So the issue over here is that we should change. That is 100%. We are fully committed to this path, and then watch the word how the things are changing around us. Acquiring knowledge holds the key to making progress in the world. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. That is, most of the human beings do not acquire knowledge, do not make an effort, do not want to pursue this path. As a result, they remain ignorant. There are two aspects here. Firstly, the facility should exist to encourage people to acquire knowledge. Secondly, someone who has acquired knowledge of it should explain the pure Quran so that people know exactly how to create new life within them. Let us go to the next two verses, 39 and 40. Removal of differences holds the key to success. لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمُ الَّذِي يَخْتَلِفُونَ فِيهِ وَلِيَعْلَمَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّهُمْ كَانُوا كَاذِبِينَ إِنَّمَا قَوْلُنَا لِشَيْءٍ إِذَا أَرَدْنَهُ أَن نَّقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونُ. I've highlighted two parts of these verses. The first one is pretty straightforward, but the second one I've gone through some details. That is lahu kun fayakun, that when Allah's laws have to come into operation, how do these function? They will definitely be bestowed with life and power, and it will be bestowed because those matters in which people now differ, one declares that this message is based on haqq, while another says it is batil, that these should become openly evident before them. And in this way, those people who reject this invitation come to know that they were false in their claim. The state of the powers of our law is such that when we make the intention for some matter, and in this way, through our law of Mashiach, it becomes decided that it has to become something, then we say to it, be. Then it ultimately comes into manifestation by passing through its various stages, and this definitely comes to pass. Differences arise due to absence of higher aim in life. The Quran has drawn our attention repeatedly to differences which arise due to the absence of the light of Wahi, and since these can only be removed through the guidance of the permanent values, hence Allah asks us to use its criteria to remove these differences. And these differences are, in fact, the darknesses of our psyche, the way we are thinking. Without removing these differences, we simply cannot unite our hearts on this path, and if we remain divided at a fundamental level, then we are of no use to the Quranic system. Never mind how many times we go through dars, lectures, discussions, books, and the Quran itself, and of course the YouTube videos and social media. It will make no differences. First, we have to remove the differences using the Quranic light and get used to it and willingly do it, so that we acquire that unity of thought and integrity within our own mind, which is required for the system of Deen, and then have a desire to join with those who are on this path. And we have gone through this point previously as well. Verse 3103 sums it up for all times. وَتَعْصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ. I have quoted two parts of this verse, which is essentially that you should hold on to the rope of Allah, which is the Quran, together and don't be divided. And also keep it in mind all the time that had you not come to the Quran, there would always have been differences and enmity and difference and of course, problems among yourselves. The issue to understand is that the human psyche required for Iman needs to remove all cognitive imbalances first and should have a desire to do so. This is why the emphasis is on accepting Iman based on La ilaha illallah, that have no gods, no other priorities in your mind. Your success must be defined in the light of the Quran, and that is the higher aim of life, that is accepting Allah and His rule in the world. And that is the basic premise on which the whole Deen is, the system of Deen is based. There is no ilah, i.e. no one else's rule is acceptable except that of Allah's. Part of this teaching is that we understand all the differences which exist and their causes. So it is important that we also understand what differences are keeping humanity apart. So it is not that we only remove our own differences. We should have a good knowledge, good understanding of what is going on in the world, so that we can relate these to the issues and the problems caused by these in the world. Need educate children in this aspect. I'll give you an example. For example, the party system is forbidden in the Quran. And wherever we are living, the political systems are mostly based on parties. And we also, if stand in line to vote for a party, then essentially what is given in the Quran, we are denying it. We are acting as an evidence against our own self. Wahi is there to help us. Then the verse points to the issue of kufr and the creation of problems by this kind of psyche in the world. If we fail to learn about this, then we simply cannot stand up against it. Verses like this are for students of the Quran and are meant to bring about a change in their understanding and should not be glossed over without pausing and reflecting. Rather, reflecting repeatedly, because we tend to forget as well. So that is why it is important that we keep reminding each other as well, so that inner strength becomes created to oppose the man-made systems at some future point in time. The second verse takes the human self exponentially from an ordinary human level to lofty heights. We need to continually expand the horizon of our consciousness in order to accommodate the vast potential of the Quranic teaching. Over here, Quran has said, "Innama qawluna li shay'in iza aradnahu an naqula lahu kun fayakun." For to anything which we have willed, we but say the word be, and it is. What is in it for us? Is it just about Allah? If we look at this verse superficially and quickly, then we will see it is about Allah, that this is the way Allah works. But what about us? What significance this verse has for us? What is in this verse which the Quran is trying to apprise us with? Let us get help from a few other verses. Quran says in 21:10, "Laqad anzalna alaykum kitaban fihi zikrukum afala taqilun," that in this book we have sent down your own dhikr, the story or the account of your eminence and loftiness, that how do you get it? Afala taqilun, and you can understand it if you use your intellect and reasoning. The Quran is for us, and if followed will help us attain eminence and loftiness. What we need to do is to employ our intellect and reasoning prowess. It is not to be taken lightly by those who grasp it, because in huwa illa zikrul lil alameen, that in this is the mention and the details of your own eminence for all times. It is applicable to an individual and then expands to include the universe. There is no limit placed on it. Next, then it invites mu'mineen to come to terms with this clause, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ, that bring your will in line with the will of Allah, who is Rabb. If we should keep in mind the system of economic system of Rububiyat, of all the worlds, and no restriction of time and space. Despite the freedom to choose being given to you, bring this in line with the value system of the Quran for Rububiyat of all the worlds, So what Quran is telling us over here is that you should construct, create your will, your own wishes and desires with, that is your own self, in such a way that it is in line with what Allah is asking you to become, and then see how things start falling in place. Just notice the vastness and expanse being provided to the human eye and its associated consciousness. So Quran is asking us to change our outlook if we want that things should, Allah's laws should help us in this world to move towards the system of Deen. Then what Quran is asking us to change our psyche, to change our outlook, and of course practically follow it, of course within the constraints of the human system initially. How to learn to train this will? Illallazina amanu wa amilus salihati lahum ajrun ghairu mamnoon. So the Quran also gives this procedure that how to bring your will in line with the will of Allah is first you accept Iman. And we know about Iman that it is acceptance of Allah as a ruler. And of course, connected with that is the life of the hereafter. Then of course, his books and the cosmic forces and of course the messengers. And then start doing salih deeds so that your potentials come out. And that is an important point, that with every deed, some potential of ours must be manifested before our own eyes. And we should be able to tangibly look at it as well, that after I've done a certain good deed, which potential I displayed and how will it help in the system of Deen. And as a result, what will happen is lahum ajrun ghairu mamnoon, that this will become continuously displayed through our own self. It will be inbuilt within us. That is what we will become, fit for the system of Deen. This is the recipe for Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen to practice together as well as individually. Understanding the functioning of Wahi helps recognize signposts on the path of Deen. There are some very important points in this slide, which I will try to go through them, but I'll be happy to answer any questions on this. Does the Wahi preserved in the Quran have the potential to trigger innama amruhu iza arada shay'an an yakula lahu kun fayakun? Now, this is the verse which is at the end of Surah Yasin. Verily, when he intends an amr, his command is be, and it is. The basic meaning of amr is that of direction. This has been used in various meanings in the Quran, and we need to see the context of its use. For example, consultation and command, the opposite of khalq, i.e. the creative process of something, the law of Allah. Since the law of requital is also a part of it, hence amr will mean decision or the decisive phase, etc. In terms of our efforts, we need to see all the aspects of striving on the path of the Quran from the time we acquire Iman individually, then coming together to form a Jamaat, then progressing through various phases of acquiring higher understanding and developing ourselves, which will then lead to the appearance of tangible results in the physical domain. So that is important, that Allah's law follows, or his amr follows through various phases. And those phases we need to understand as signposts. This will include planning and practical measures at a later phase, and this will need to be worked out in the light of the guidance of Quran. All this requires mutual consultation on a continuous basis. Go to the last two verses of today's presentation. Some signs of the path are explained. وَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا فِي اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا ظُلِمُوا لَا نُبُوِّئَنَّهُمْ فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَلَا أَجْرُ الْآخِرَةِ أَكْبَرُ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. At this point in time, there is no doubt that the weakness of the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen has reached an extremity, so much so that they have had to abandon their homes and possessions. But they should know that according to this same law of ours, which is noted above, these people who are being forced to leave their homes and possessions due to the injustice and tyranny of these opponents, we will bestow them with both an extremely pleasant abode in this world, and the reward of the future will be far greater than this. Aha, if only these people who are mocking their apparent weakness and feebleness were aware of this law of Allah, that those people who remain tenaciously steadfast on their program and have complete trust in the concreteness of the laws of their Rabb, they will be bound to receive all this. Some further reflections on these two verses. What is noted in these two verses is a process preceding the establishment of the system of Deen. Can we relate it to Iza Aradna, who An-Nakula lahu kun fayakun stated in the previous verse? Because what was stated in the previous verse is clarified by these two steps. Because Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen were working on this path of Deen initially, they were coming together, they had hardships, and then the system started taking shape in some small piece of land. And as a result, people had to migrate. And this migration, of course, to somebody looking at it, would have thought that this is a curse. This is something which these people are doing to themselves for some kind of a utopian idea of Deen. But the Quran over here provides support and says this is a signpost, because this is how the system develops. When people come together, they will feel that they will face certain hardships, but they should never give up. Is this the way the command of Allah begins to come into action, and we as students of the Quran get our path signposted with such signs appearing on the path of our striving? Next is, what did Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen do under man-made systems? Firstly, they accepted Iman by seeking guidance and then becoming fully committed to it, rejecting the system of Taghut. La ikraha fi Deen qad tabayyana ar-rushdu min al-ghayy faman yakfur bit-taghut wa yu'min billah. We have gone through this verse previously as well, that Quran says there is no compulsion in Deen. You have to make a decision by looking at the evidence of it. If you think after reading the Quran that this is for me, then you have to reject the man-made systems and those problems associated with that, and then you fully get focused towards developing your own self, and by coming together, removing differences and uniting your hearts, and then see that how your Iman in Billah, Yumin Billah, how this then strengthens your resolve on this path. Then they come together and made deliberate efforts to unite their hearts and minds, and this served as a signpost on this path. Growth in deeper understanding of the human world and its problems is part of this self-development process, and this is based on permanent values. The results of their efforts gradually start to manifest in the outer world, and more people gradually join in this striving. And that's the end of my presentation. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen. Thank you.